Good morning, this is Alexander from the Rialta Owners Group of America, and welcome to another tech video. Today what we're going to work on is the heater assist hoses. Those are the 4 small hoses that are located at the rear of the unit, above and below the water heater, that have a tendency to dry rot out and leak when you least expect it or when it's inconvenient. Not that there's ever a convenient time for a heater hose to begin to leak. So today what we're going to do is we're going to describe the hoses that we found for replacement that should last a lot longer than the original hoses, how to do it, and how to rest easy when you're going down the road knowing that those aren't leaking in the back and your antifreeze is staying just where it's supposed to be, inside the cooling system. Instead of going with the stock hoses, which tend to dry rot, and if you don't have your eye on them, it's easy for that to escape your attention, we ordered our replacement hoses from a place called PegasusAutoRacing.com. Now, I don't own any stock in the company, but if these hoses work as good as I hope they will, maybe I should consider that. The hoses that we ordered for replacement aren't made from the standard rubber or neoprene. These are actually made from high-temperature silicone rubber. 5/8" ID on that, along with the appropriate replacement stainless steel clamps that will go on. We'll replace each elbow one at a time. Before you begin, few safety things you need to keep in mind. Number one, make sure that the engine is fully cooled down. Use a temperature gauge or whatever else you have handy in order to let you know that the temperature of that water or the antifreeze in your system, depending on what you've been refilling it with while it's been leaking, is below 120 degrees Fahrenheit. The reason for this is anything above 120 degrees Fahrenheit can and will scald you. Something you don't want to do, especially with antifreeze, since it has an oily type substance feel to it. It'll stick to your skin and those burns can be pretty severe, and it disables your motorhome and you all at the same time. So make sure the engine's cool, make sure you have something to catch the antifreeze runoff so you're not polluting the environment or your favorite shirt, and make sure that you have somebody around that keeps an eye on you in case you need a little bit of assistance. It is not necessary to lift the vehicle off the ground for this repair, although it is convenient. So, if you have issues with your back or issues with mobility, it's best to get somebody else to do this job and leave your 6,000 pounds of Rialta sitting on the ground on all 4 the way it's supposed to be. This is the flashing warning light that you'll get when your engine coolant is low. The check engine light on the left, well, that's another matter. It's in yellow, which means it needs to be addressed soon, but it's not critical. Anything that's flashing red means stop and address it immediately. In this case, an alarm accompanied by the flashing light tells us that our coolant level is low and we should pull over and make sure that we take the appropriate steps to correct this. One of the first places you may notice the issue is when you're walking next to your kitchenette and you step in something warm and wet on the floor. Now, unless you have dogs and cats on board, chances are pretty good that you've just discovered a leak in a way that's pretty uncomfortable by stepping right in it. That area located here shows you the hose that is on the upper side of the water heater. There's one, and then back over in here, a little hard to see right now, but in this section right here, you have the second hose. What will happen is it will leak here and down the pipe, where you see it here, and then behind this panel, it will wick through the carpet, and then you'll step in it. Antifreeze itself is pretty sticky. You need some decent cleaner to get that out of there. But these ones are easy to get to. The ones that aren't so easy to get to are those ones that are underneath. So let's get a look at those. Let's begin. On the driver's side, in front of the rear wheel, right next to the gray water and black water tank drains, if you take a look up, you're going to see the hoses. Now, this particular one right here, this was a road repair that was done in Kentucky. We discovered where the leak was and did have a replacement hose, but we did have 2-part epoxy, we did have some Gorilla Tape, and we did have zip ties. We also had enough antifreeze, so we filled it up and we made it all the way back to Western New York from Kentucky on a bandage repair. But that's only good for a temporary. We need to get rid of this and replace it right away. And while we're at it, we'll replace the hose that's right next to it, because when one goes, the other one's next. When you look up, you'll see that there is a shield that's held in place by several Phillips head sheet metal screws to protect these hoses. If your hand is the right size, you can get in without a problem and get these hoses changed. Otherwise, you may need to put a little penetrating oil on those, let them sit for a while, and then slowly remove those sheet metal screws and take the guard off. It's entirely up to you and the size of your hand. So let me give you an update. I had a WWBD moment, which is a what would Brad do moment. So in order to make this a more effective video, I've removed the tire, which was a whole new set of circumstances, so that I could access the screws to take the guard completely off. Now you can see the hoses where they protrude through the floor, and why these things need to be treated with appropriate rust inhibitors before you close this back up. That surface rust can pretty soon lead to holes, and then holes lead to leaks, and leaks lead to broken down on the side of the road, which none of us want. Something you should take note of is most of the multi-function screwdrivers that you can pick up for a couple of bucks in the home stores, they also serve as, well, nut wrenches, and oftentimes are the exact same size as hose hub nuts. Do not save your hose clamps for the next time around, because you're going to have to cut the hoses. It's best to get it out of the way. The reason we cut the hoses instead of pulling them off is because we don't want to cause any kinking or damage to these already aged heater lines. So what you're going to use is a sharp knife, and you're going to slowly cut through the length along the old metal hose, and then you'll spread it off carefully. Then you're going to clean the ends with a steel wool or steel wire brush or light duty sandpaper to clean that off, and then lightly lubricate it with some dish soap to help you slide the new hose back on. Don't forget to put the clamps on the new hoses before you put the hoses in place. You can see exactly what I was referring to as far as the draining of the antifreeze. I cut the uppers first so I can drain what is residual in the water heater. Then I'll cut the lowers next and catch what's left. So here's where we are so far. We've managed to take the hoses off. These ends need to be cleaned with a wire brush and a rag. We've gotten rid of the old hose clamps. We have an idea how much antifreeze we need to replace, which isn't too much. Here's the old hoses. This is the repair that was done on the road trip. Not bad for an old man and a 13-year-old girl fixing their RV on the road. If you take a look at the old hoses, in the end you can see that there's just a single layer of the fiberglass reinforcement on the rubber hose. And what we have in the new hoses is we have 3 layers of reinforced fiberglass in high temp silicone. This is what's going back on. We'll use the old hoses as our measure pattern for the cuts for the new hoses, so they slide right back in just like original equipment. So we've cut our new hoses to match the length of the old hoses so they install properly. But we did something else. We're getting rid of these old hose clamps, well, because it's a good idea just to buy new ones, but for another good reason as well. The new hose clamps that we ordered have a double sleeve inside, so that they actually are less likely to cause a pinch crack or a pinch cut on the new hoses. This will help prevent leaks from occurring from simple vibrations of just going down the road. The vibrations in a race car, of course, are much more than they would be in an RV, unless you're driving on the roads in and around New York State, in which case, you know, it's far worse. When you're putting the new hoses on, it's best to put them on the lower section first, and make sure that you line up the hose that's going to be connecting to the top with the distance from the top before you rotate it on. If it's too far out, it's going to be bent out in this angle, which puts strain on this area that's cast in place and shouldn't be stretched, or it's going to be pushed back in this direction when it's turned up, in which case you create a pinch point, which is also going to cause the coolant not to flow properly, and premature wear on the hose, which could cause failure. When you're installing the new hoses, keep in mind that there is a hub or a furrow on the metal lines where you're going to be placing the new lines. When you put the new lines on, they need to proceed past that hub long enough to leave 1/4 to 1/2 inch of extra material after that, so that you can put the clamp in just behind the hub. If you were to x-ray where this is here, you'd see that this clamp comes in right here behind the hub. So you have pressure from this furrow on the inside diameter of the hose, and then the clamp giving pressure from the outside of the hose to make for a tight seal. And with our new hoses all installed and placed and checked for leaks, we're ready to put the guard back on, get the tire back on, and get back on the road. Don't forget, when you're all done, you need to top off the antifreeze that you've lost, both from the original leak and from the repair. We lost about a quart. We top it off, and then we take a 50-minute run, and then we top it off again, because it takes a while for that air to circulate through the system so that you get it all completely out. So you're going to want to pay close attention to that. Make sure your caps are back on securely, your lug nuts are back on securely if you did happen to take off the tire, as we did in this case, so that you're safe all the way around. As far as the degree of difficulty, between a 1 and a 5, this is about a 2. It takes a common tool, a multi-tool that you can buy at any home center right at the checkout counter, and about 60 minutes worth of time in order to do it and do it properly, including checking for the leaks. So if you have the money to have somebody else do it for you, well, you're the lucky one. For the rest of us, I'm Alex, and this has been the Rialta Owners Group of America on another do-it-yourself task project. Until the next repair, keep it Rialta.